Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Earlier today, when someone came to visit the monastery, came to chat after the meal, he had a number of questions. One of them, he was recounting how he'd heard this Russian proverb that whenever there is love, there is jealousy. So I thought that was an interesting proverb. And so it brought up a conversation and reflections around the nature of the way we live in community, the way we relate to other people, and what the Buddha's teaching points to in that. And these are a useful area to consider, to look at. So, talking with this fellow today, the first thing I said was, well, it depends what you mean by love, because in the Buddhist teachings, in the Buddhist tradition, there's certainly different kinds of ways that we can love each other, and so that there's certain kinds of love that will bring painfulness and negativity, it will bring jealousy and conflict and pain of various kinds. But also the other kinds of love, the other kinds of ways that we can connect as human beings in a positive way that don't bring that are ways of relating that support liberation, support a genuine quality of freedom, and don't lead towards negativity and stress, conflict within us. In this respect, the one of the teachings that's most relevant is a sutta in the middle length discourses, the Majjhima Nikaya, called the Piya Jatika Sutta, which means born from those who are dear. And it starts off with an incident where the Buddha is sitting meditating in some kind of public park or some kind of public area, and this fellow comes by who, as I recall, had lost lost his child through the child's death, and so he was unhappy and miserable, and got into conversation with the Buddha and was describing the cause of his unhappiness, that his child had died, and therefore he was so sad and miserable. And the Buddha made the apparently matter-of-fact comment that unhappiness, sorrow, suffering is born from those who are dear to us. And this fellow says, "Oh, what rubbish! No, those who are dear to us, they're the source of happiness. They're the source of joy in our lives. You're talking rubbish." Even though the fact that he'd been unhappy about the loss of his own child, something in him didn't make the connection, and so he took exception to what the Buddha said, took umbrage, and went off. And as the story goes nearby, he came across some other people who were also in the park, and they were playing dice or gambling somehow together. And he said, "I just met this stupid monk, and he said that sorrow and unhappiness, suffering comes from those that are dear to us, and I think that's wrong. I think it's joy and delight That's what comes from those who are dear. And they said, yeah, right, of course you're right. Everyone knows that. Any fool knows that our loved ones make us happy. And so this fellow, agreeing with the gamblers and not agreeing with the Buddha, went off on his way. So then the story of this encounter, these encounters, circulate through the city of Savatthi, and eventually these stories reach the palace, and there's this dialogue leads to between King Pasenadi and Queen Malika, and they get into a discussion about this. And so the king says to the queen, I can't believe that the Buddha would have said that sorrow and unhappiness, suffering, is born from those who are dear to us. Everybody knows that our dear ones are the great source of happiness in our life. Then the queen says, well, if the Blessed One said it, it must be true. And he's in this typical domestic dispute. King Pasenadi says, away with you, Malika. No matter what the Blessed One says, you always say, it must be, if he says it, it must be true. Off with you, away with you, get out of my sight. So there was a bit of domestic conflict there, and disagreement. But anyway, she says, well, have it your own way, Your Majesty, but I still hold that if the Blessed One, if the Buddha says that this is the case, then truly it must be the case. And maybe next time we have the chance to see him, we can ask this question of him ourselves. And so sure enough, when there's the next time there's a visit of the Buddha to see them, or they meet up, the king puts this question to the Buddha and said, I'm sure you must have been misquoted. You couldn't have really said that. Because it's just common sense. Everyone knows that happiness comes from those who are dear to us. And the Buddha said, no, great king, you're wrong. I did say that. That's exactly what I said. And so you are incorrect, and Queen Malika is right. She's correct in her understanding, and she agrees with what I say. So the king is a bit miffed at that. And then the Buddha said, well, let me ask you a question, great king, as he does in these encounters. And he says, great king, are you fond of Princess Vajiri, one of the daughters of Queen Malika and King Pasenadi? He said, well, yeah, of course, she's the dearest thing to me. Princess Vajiri is the dearest thing. She's my most beloved of children. So then the Buddha says, well, great king, how would you feel if something unpleasant, some unpleasant change came about in Princess Vajiri, like if she got sick, or she got injured, or somebody attacked her, or those kind of things? How would you feel if some kind of change came about in her, that she was injured or ill or disabled somehow? Well, I'd be very upset. I'd be really unhappy. I'd be miserable. I'd be most distressed. And then he said, well, what about Queen Malika? If something unpleasant happened to her, how would you feel? Oh, I'd be very upset. I'd be most distressed. I'd be very pained. It would be difficult to bear. What about your chief minister? What about your other members of your court? What about the city of Savatthi? What about the kingdom of Magadha? The kingdom of Magadha. Yeah. How would you feel? And he goes through this long sequence of different things that the king was attached to, from the family, even the royal court, and his town, and the country, and so forth. And one by one, the king answers in the same way. Yes, if some kind of change, some sort of alteration, some kind of negative event happened, I'd be miserable. I'd be upset. I'd be distressed. So you get the feeling that somewhere along the line, the king starts to get the point, and then the Buddha keeps repeating the refrain. This is why I said, great king, unhappiness, suffering is born from those that are dear to us. That's why, because through that quality of attachment, of identification. There's another well-known incident where Visakha, who also lived in the city of Savatthi, she was one of the great lay disciples, lay supporters of the Buddha, and she was also a great mother. She had, according to legend, she had 20 children, 20 daughters, 20 sons, and they each had 20 children of their own. So she was supposed to have been grandmother to 400 grandchildren. So lots of birthdays to remember. Whether this is precise historical fact is I can't say for sure, but certainly there's the stories go she had a big family and lots of children and grandchildren. So anyway, one day she came to the Jetavana where the Buddha was living, and in the middle of the day, and she had her hair was wet and her clothing was wet from the ceremonies of a funeral. And so the Buddha said to her, Visakha, why are you coming here in the middle of the day like this, with your hair wet and your clothes wet, and you're looking very distressed and upset, unhappy? She said, oh, well, I've just come from the funeral of my favorite grandchild. My granddaughter just passed away. She just died, and she was such a young child, just a few years old. And now she's died, so I was very unhappy. So I wanted to come here and to see you because of my sorrow, the feeling of grief. So then the Buddha asked her, so how is it, Visakha? How is it for you? Are you fond of having so many children and grandchildren? Oh yes, my children, my grandchildren, they're the great source of happiness in my life. And he said, well, Visakha, would you like to have as many children and grandchildren as there are people here in the city of Savatthi? Oh yes, well, I've already got lots, I've got dozens of children and grandchildren already, but I'd love to have as many as people there are in Savatthi. So then the Buddha said to her, well, Visakha, how many people die every day in the city of Savatthi? Oh, well, at least 10 people every day is, without fail, at least 10 people die. Well, if not 10, 9, if not 9, 8 people, 7 people, 6 people, half a dozen people die at least every day in Savatthi. And then so on down through the list, at least, she said, well, at least, the very least, there's at least one person every day who dies in Savatthi. So then the Buddha said to her, so, Visakha, if at least somebody dies every day in Savatthi, would you ever be without your hair and your clothing wet from being at the funeral if you had that many children and grandchildren? So she was a lot quicker on the uptake than King Pasenadi. She immediately said, enough of having so many children and grandchildren. The meaning was immediately clear to her. She could pick up on that. Yeah, she could see. Yeah, that's right. If I had that many children, I'd always be at somebody's funeral, and I'd always be feeling the sense of grief and pain. And then the Buddha points out in these teachings, he said, if you have 100 dear ones, you have 100 pains. You have 90 dear ones, 90 pains. 80, 70, 60, 50, 40. 40 dear ones, 40 pains. 10 dear ones, 10 pains. 5 dear ones, 5 pains. 4, 3, 2, 1. If 1 dear one, 1 pain. No dear ones, no pains. Suffering is born from those that are dear to us. So then we might think, well, this is really miserable. So we're supposed to have no friends. We're supposed to just cut ourselves off or freeze our heart solid to just make ourselves alone and like a rock, like an island, just divided off from everybody else, to freeze the heart, to be uncaring, unfeeling. But that's not what the Buddha is recommending, because elsewhere in the teachings you have this very direct recommendation for the Buddha for us to have loving kindness for all beings. Even as a mother protects with her life, her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So if we consider this, they seem to be contradictory teachings, don't they? On the one hand, he's saying that suffering comes from attaching to those that are dear to us. And on the other hand, he seems to be saying that we should have a sense of love and affection for all beings, similar to, or on the level with a mother loving her only child. So it's good to consider this. I find this a very helpful area to reflect upon, particularly in learning to live with other people, in our families, in our community, in the monastery, in our relationships, in the workplace, in the world itself. Because what these teachings point to is that there are different kinds of ways that we can have affection for each other, that we can bind ourselves to others. So on the one hand, the kind of loving that the Buddha is talking about in these teachings, about suffering coming from those that we love. The word that's used is piya, transliterated into English as P-I-Y-A, piya, like piya jatika, piya Dhamma. Piya jatika is born from those that are dear. And that dearness, that automatically implies a quality of possessiveness. It's an owning kind of love. It's, I belong to you, you belong to me, you're my child, you're my parent, you're my Ajahn, you're my student, you're mine, you're my partner, my wife, my husband. There's a possessiveness there. And the degree to which that bond is built around possessiveness, around owning. And then there's also a degree of separation. I'm here, you're there. I'm your brother, I'm your son, I'm your parent, I'm your daughter, I'm your teacher, I'm your student. And you are the other. And so, in a way, it's a kind of relationship of separateness, with me here and you over there, with a separate individuals, but tied together with this with quality of affection or of interest or caring. And it's this is my reflections on this, but this seems to be what the Buddha is pointing to in these teachings, is that as long as we connect with each other or try to relate in terms of say our community or our family or our working relationships or with the greater world, with this sense of self and other, in a way, a relationship built upon self-view, on sakkaya ditthi. As long as that quality of self-view is firmly in place, then that connection is always going to bring suffering with it. There can be gratifying or pleasant aspects to it, just as people keep saying in these teachings, oh no, our loved ones are the great joy in our life. Of course, there can be happy and pleasant, delightful, inspiring, beautiful elements to it. But the degree to which that bond is possessive or is built on self-view, then that's the degree to which we experience pain. And we'll experience a sense of loss, of bereavement, a sense of being diminished, or there's a missing piece, or something has made us incomplete. That as a painful, grieving quality there. I was noticing that just now that we have in the winter season, we have all of the benches, the garden benches brought into the courtyard. As you walk around the cloister, and you can see the little brass plates on the back of the benches, and as you walk along, there's many of the names of the people that the benches are dedicated for are very familiar to me. And you can see that there's Peter Bryan and Nina Coulthard and Catherine Hewitt and these old friends that have people that I've known over many years, and now they've died, they've passed away. And if you're attached to the memory, or there's a sense of bonding to the person in the way of self-view, or of self and other in that way, then you feel a sense of grief or loss. Like, oh, Peter, he died. Oh, yeah, he was such a nice guy, such a cantankerous, wonderful fellow in his wheelchair, and remembering those great times we had when he used to come on retreats, and we have interesting conversations through his letterboard, because he couldn't really speak, and had difficulty communicating because of his illness and so on. Yeah, the mind can take hold of a memory or a perception and conjure up that feeling of loss or sadness. Or we can, let's say, walking past the empty benches of the dead, those who passed away, and just to let the names or the benches that have been offered sort of in memory be something that gladdens the heart. It reminds us of the presence of these good friends, these people who were associated with the Sangha, the community, lived as part of our lives and Dhamma friends for many years, to have a sense of a different way of appreciating their presence. So that other kind of affection or love is simply what we call metta, or loving kindness. And this is when we relate to others based on metta and the other Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, the four sublime abidings, these four bright, radiant states of mind. This is defining a different way that we can relate to other beings. We relate in terms of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and delight in the good fortune of others, and equanimity. And so that's how we can connect, how we can relate with each other, not based on self-view, but based on a genuine and unconditional loving and caring, a quality of compassion and sympathy. But it's not dependent, it's not based on self-view, and that when we relate to each other or think of each other in that way, it's a very different manner of connecting, a different way of relating. So when the Buddha encourages the qualities of caring and support, say within the monastic community or within the greater Buddhist community, it's very much this quality of metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, the relationship. You could say relationship based on wholeness rather than separateness. It's ways of relating to other beings not based on self-view, but based on Dhamma, and that there is a bonding, there is a connecting with other beings, but it's based on that these dimensions of the heart, which are independent, which are bright, which are not, say, limited, bound by the divisions created by attaching to self and other, me here, you out there, but are instead the natural disposition, or in a way the emotional states of the pure heart. When the pure heart is directed out towards other beings, and these four qualities of the Brahma Viharas, these define the ways in which what Luang Por Sumedho would call mature emotions. The loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are our emotional nature, the way that we relate to other beings, when the heart is unclouded by greed, hatred, delusion, is unclouded by self-view, by attachment to conventions and rituals, to Silapata Paramasa, is unconfused by doubt and so forth. So in terms of developing the qualities of a genuine community, qualities of samagi, harmony within the group, within a monastic community, a group of people living together, or the guests that live here, the lay residents that live here, this is very pertinent, but also in terms of the way that we relate with the outer world, with other different Buddhist groups or other connected monasteries or unconnected monasteries, the greater Buddhist community, also the greater world in general. We can see how we can drift. We can follow habits of defining self and other, just carried along by the flow of mental habit, of perception, and be quite unconsciously creating the sense of division, the self-view of I'm here, you're other. This is Amaravati, we do things this way here, and over there, Chithurst, they're like that, or at the Tibetan centers they do this, or amongst the Christians they do that, or whatever group we're looking at. We can unconsciously attach a feeling of self to our own practice, our own style, and look at others and say they're different. They're not doing it right, or we've got it right, they've got it wrong. Or you might feel like, well, we've got it wrong, and it's much better over there. The way they do it is much preferable, and we should do it like that. When we sort of start to consider the ways that we perceive or judge each other, to see these different ways of connecting, as I find for myself that it's most helpful to understand how those different modes of relating come into being. How is it that we get caught up in that creation of division, that sense of me here and you out there, that a relationship based on separateness, and how do we establish the different way, relating through loving kindness, through compassion, and so forth? How do we do that? In this conversation that I was having with this fellow today, I was reminded of an exchange that happened years and years ago that I often recount because it had a strong effect on me at the time. And this was way back in the early days of Chithurst. I think probably of everyone who's gathered here, I think probably only Ajahn Sundara was in the room at the time. And this was when Ajahn Chandasiri, who was a fairly newly ordained nun at that time, was going to go back and visit her family. It was probably around this time of year, Christmas or some such. And she had a particularly tense and difficult relationship with her parents. Were very unhappy about her being a nun, and wouldn't let her go about the house with a shaved head, and she had to always wear a hat. And they were very critical and upset with her choice to live as a nun, and not unusual for us. And many of us had that kind of difficulty. But anyway, she was about to go off to Edinburgh to visit her family, and at one particular time we were gathered in the community was gathered in the reception room at Chithurst, and she asked Lumpur, have you got any advice for relating with my family? I'm going to go back and be visiting them and staying with them for a few days. Yeah, have you got any advice as to how I should best relate to my parents? Very common, reasonable, understandable question. But then what Lumpur said really struck home. I think it was very helpful advice for her, but also it stayed with me and many of us for a long time after. Because what he said was, the kindest thing that you can do for your parents is not to create them. The kindest thing that you can do for your parents is not to create them. Which wasn't the answer I was expecting. It was. I was thinking. I just as she asked the question, my mind, I guess, if I can remember, came up with how she could be helpful or explain Buddhism so they'd be able to understand it in their own terms or such like. But it wasn't what he said at all. His comment just came from this very clear but different angle. It was a very clear and definitely distinctly attuned to that moment kind of a comment. And then as he talked about that, and since that time, since I've reflected on that teaching, I found that extraordinarily useful advice, because if I've got difficulty with you, then the tendency of my mind is to, I'll think about you and I'll think about the conversations that we've had and what went wrong and how there was difficulty and tension and how I could have explained things better, or when you said something, how I shouldn't have reacted so defensively, and I should have said this, and I wish you hadn't said that, and then if you'd said this, then I would have said that, and off it goes. There's me here, there's you there, and then we reiterate old conversations, we imagine future conversations, and try to get things right in our imagination. And we don't realize that what's happening is that we're creating a facsimile me and a facsimile you, and then trying to imagine a dialogue or a conversation, a connection between the two of us that feels good, that feels right, where everything is all right, everything is okay. And we're not aware of the fact that we're creating a solid sense of me and a solid sense of you. And that my projection of what you are and where you're at and why you think the way you do and the way you actually do is completely based on my own perceptions, my own suppositions, my own habits of thinking. So I'm creating you, and that's what Luang Por meant in that statement. We're creating each other, and then we carry around those creations, our own self-image, and then the image that we carry of others, and say, oh yeah, Ajahn Gandasila is like this, and Ajahn Jayanta is like that, and Ajahn Kalyana is this way, and Samanera Santamana is like that, Ajahn Sundara is this way, Anagarika Kiara is that way, and Sister Bodhipala is the other way. We create images, and some of them can be based on reality, and others can just be based on supposition. And we can be largely unconscious of the way that we create those forms, those images, our preferred reality, or our designated, our way of designating something into being. We create a design, and then we bring it into being, and then we take that to be true and absolute and real. So what happens when we do this, as I'm sure we've all experienced, is that when we get so busy with our projection of the other person, particularly if there's a tense or difficult relationship, or a one that's very say filled with projection, or it can be very positive, like if you're infatuated with somebody, that you get so taken up with your projected image of the other, and it's so worried about getting it wrong, and so eager to get it right, so filled with our own projection of what we fear or what we want or what we're annoyed by, that when we meet the other person face to face, or we talk on the phone or whatever, that we don't actually meet them at all. We just meet our own projection, and then meanwhile doing exactly the same thing. So I'm sure we've all had this experience of being in a kind of double monologue, where you're in one respect you're sitting face to face, but in another you're not communicating at all. You're not really in any kind of genuine conversation. You're talking to your projection, and they're talking to their projection, and you're just waiting for a gap in their flow of words so you can carry on with your monologue. So we never really meet, we never really connect, and so you can't establish any kind of real community or any kind of real communion, any genuine samagi in that way. We are so, and it can be so ironic and painful, because we can try really hard. We can spend a lot of trying to get it right, really working to get everything and say everything in a way that's going to be acceptable, it's going to be good, it's going to be something that people want to hear, or it's going to bring harmony. But in that, even though we can be very sincere in trying to get it right, we can still be just creating this me here, you there, and the more that we create a solid sense of division, the more that our eagerness to get it right is based on self-view, then the more inevitably it goes wrong, and it leads to dukkha and misunderstanding and negativity. So that in this respect, what's most helpful is to develop a mindfulness of how we create each other, how we create ourselves, our own image of how we see ourselves as a monk or as a nun, as a layperson, as a woman, as a man, as old, as young, as someone who's got it together, or someone who's falling apart, or someone who's extraordinarily mediocre, somewhere in the middle. The stories we tell about ourselves and the stories we tell about each other. To bring our mindfulness to that, to really listen to that habit, to get familiar with that self-image and how we bring that into being. And we bring it into being through habitually believing our thoughts, taking our thoughts, our judgments, our perceptions to be absolute truths. So mindfulness is the key element here. Mindfulness of our thinking habits, just seeing what the mind is doing. Let's say in the process of an evening sitting or morning sitting, or while we're going about our various kinds of work in the monastery or outside with our families or in the working world or wherever it might be, to see how the mind creates those stories, those patterns of thinking, and to say, oh look, I'm creating my sister, I'm creating Lumpur Sumedho, I'm creating Ajahn Vajiro, oh look, I'm creating Ajahn Pasno, oh look, I'm creating Anagarika Wesen, Anagarika David. The mind takes up an image and invests it with life. It says, here's this person, and when we see that the mind is doing it, oh look at that, that's what's happening, I'm thinking about that person, or I have to have a meeting with such and such a person, then looking at that happening. And to say to not create other people is not trying to attach to an idea that I don't exist, or there is no real Ajahn Gandasilo, so I'll just pretend there's an empty mat there. It's not some kind of false sort of stupid overlay that we're creating, but it's more recognizing the dependent and conditioned nature of our perceptions. That the story that we tell about ourselves, a habitual version of who and what we are, is just a convenient fiction. The stories that we say about other people is just a convenient fiction. It's only something that's designated into existence, determined into existence. There isn't anything that's solid and permanently there. So that mindfulness of how we do that, bringing the attention to that, is the key piece. Seeing how the mind follows those patterns, and then recognizing that it is just a pattern. It's not an absolute truth. Now, when we talk about mindfulness, oftentimes there's different layers to the quality of mindfulness, and again, this is helpful to understand and to consider, because there's say different levels of refinement in what we call mindfulness. So when we look at the word itself, sati literally just means remembering, and so sati on its own is a very coarse kind of mindfulness. It's just a bringing attention to the present moment of what's going on. So again, as Lumpur Sumedho would often say, like the squirrels jumping through the branches of the trees, they're very mindful. They've got to be attentive to the spring in the branch they're jumping off, and the branch, the twig that they're aiming for. They've got to pay close attention. They've got to be mindful of where to jump for, how to make the leap, and where they're going to land, and what they've got to grab onto. So then they can say, yeah, the squirrels are really mindful, but that mindfulness is not particularly liberating or liberated. You can't say that squirrel is an enlightened being just because they're impressively good jumpers through the branches. that or a cat, hunting a mouse in the undergrowth, in the hedgerow, the cat stalking a mouse, or a blackbird listening for a worm moving in the earth. They're paying close attention. They're being mindful of the different sounds or the different perceptions of movement. So that, I would say that's sati. That's certainly there's an attention, a fixity of attention, and an awareness of change and so on. But it's not in any way liberated. It's a very conditioned and dependent mindfulness. So Luang Por Chah would compare that sati on its own to the hand that picks up an object. So that's the mindfulness is the job of sati is to take hold of a particular object. So the element that is more refined, or what makes it develop towards liberation, is sampajanya, which Luang Por would compare to the arm that sort of directs the hand to where it wants to go to, so that it's the agent that enables the mind, the quality of attention to move around and to be directed. So sati sampajanya, and oftentimes when we use the word mindfulness, we're using it as a shorthand term for mindfulness and clear comprehension. So sampajanya means, sati sampajanya is mindfulness of an object, but also mindfulness of the context within which it's appearing. So that this is really when we're talking about contemplation, or say watching our thoughts, or learning to not get caught up in believing our thoughts, or say in this instance, learning to not create ourselves or to create other people. It's this quality of sati sampajanya. It's not just observing the thought happening, like thinking as a thought, but also sampajanya is attending to the content of the thought, and also the context within which the thought is occurring. So I often like to say that sati sampajanya is mindfulness not just of an object, or say being mindful of the words I'm saying, but also the context within which those words are being said. So like, I'm aware that it's now 9:16, and I started this Dhamma talk at about 8:35, so that we're about 40 minutes in. That's about how much of the talk has gone so far. Also that this is the context of what have said so far, and the themes that are popping up into mind of where this talk might go. That's all part of the sampajanya aspect of sati. So it's not just paying attention to the words that are being said, but also what's gone already, what's potential in the future, whether things are seem to be being understood, whether I'm speaking clearly enough or loudly enough. Sense of remembering people's comments about the sound system in the temple, that even though it sounds really loud and clear to me, but sometimes for people around the edges it's muffled and blurry and not so clear. So it's a sense of, must remember not to speak too quickly. Must remember that English is not the first language of most of the people in the room. But, to be attentive to those contextual details, the other elements of the context. When we use the quality of sati sampajanya, this is in a way the area of spiritual faculties that we have, the area of capacity that we have, that we are using when we're trying to apply reflection. So these other terms, like Dhamma Vijaya, the investigation of reality, Dhamma Vijaya, one of the factors of enlightenment, or Yoniso Manasikara, what's called wise reflection. These are both qualities that depend on sati sampajanya, on mindfulness, clear comprehension. It's that domain, that area of spiritual faculties that we're using. We're applying mindfulness, clear comprehension in that capacity to explore, to investigate. So what's going on here? Oh, look at that, I'm creating my mother again. Or, whenever I talk about my my sisters, I always tend to say that, or when I think about Luang Por, and the thoughts take shape in that way, and when I'm thinking about myself, then my pattern of thinking goes that way. Look at that. When people ask me, why did you become a monk? Then I tend to tell stories in this way, or I tend to avoid saying that. I always like to emphasize this. Look at that. That quality of curiosity and exploring, noticing the patterns that are there. This is the area of sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. So it's also the term that Luang Por Sumedho coined, intuitive awareness. That's his translation for sati sampajanya, for mindfulness and clear comprehension. Intuitive awareness. So again, it's alluding to this capacity to attune the attention to the present moment, and also not just focusing on a single object or a single detail, but the context within which things are occurring. And also, he particularly used the term intuitive, because it's referring to, in a sense, our innate attunement to the way things are, the way things work, the patterning of Dhamma, and the way things are, the patterning of nature, that might not be there or apparent to our conscious mind or our sort of surface level thinking, but on a more basic level, that in us which recognizes the orderliness or the patterning of things as we experience them, where they've come from, what's caused them, where they're likely to go. So using the word intuitive, Luang Por, this is in conversations with him as to how he came up with that term, and when he's talked about it, this is the kind of thing he's referred to. So it's all that domain of drawing upon our intuitive sense of the way things work, our sense of the whole moment, which is a kind of non-conceptual appreciation of the present. So when we're looking at our flow of thoughts and the way that we create ourselves, create others, then we're drawing upon that faculty to recognize, well, my usual way of describing things, that's not the whole story. How could it be the whole story? This is the way I prefer to see things, or I'm habituated to seeing things in this particularly negative way or positive way, or a way based upon my own conditioning as an English speaker, or as a male, or as a monastic, or whatever the conditioning might be. And it's that which can see, that can only be a version of reality. It can't be the whole picture, because it's based on the experiences of a lifetime, the experiences of a particular set of conditioning, a language, the habits grown up from the effects of a particular society, a particular family, a particular kind of education. And from different points of view, from being a woman, or being someone who is Thai, or someone who is German, or someone who is French or Slovenian or Slovakian, it's going to appear differently. It's going to be a different picture. It's going to be a different reality. So the more that we can tap into that quality of mindfulness and clear comprehension, of intuitive awareness, then the more we can find the genuine roots of harmony, the more we can abide in that uncreated, unconditioned, that which is not creating self and other, that which is free from the boundaries that the mind creates, the false divisions of subject and object, self and other, and that can rather can apprehend the whole picture, can apprehend the experience of the moment, experience of engaging with others, or living with others, or working with others from a far more unified perspective, from not fixating on habits of self-view, of seeing things in terms of me here, the world out there, as fixed and separate realities. So the third layer of mindfulness, just to complete that part of it, is satipanya, or mindfulness conjoined with wisdom. And so this is in a sense the symbol for that Luang Por Chah would say is like this is like the body that the arm and the hand are connected to. So an arm and a hand just on its own is not very much use. If they haven't got a body that they're joined to, they can't really do very much. They can just sort of lie there, and be pretty lifeless. So panya, or wisdom, is like the life source. That's the body that the arm and the hand are connected to. And without that root connection to what's alive and what is the sort of the power source of the whole thing, then those others don't really have much value or meaning. So if, say, seeing with mindfulness and clear comprehension is seeing the object in its context, then panya is applying things at an even deeper or closer quality of magnification. It's looking up even closer, getting up even closer, looking at in even more scrupulous detail. So it's not just recognizing that this is the half moon night, and we're in the midst of a Dhamma talk, and I've been talking about different ways of connecting or relating, or talking about different kinds of mindfulness. It's also recognizing this is all an event happening in our consciousness. This temple, this voice, the feeling of the body, the feelings of heat or cold, the feelings of weight, sound, smell, taste, touch, these are all mental events. The temple and this occasion is experienced through the agency of our own mind. It's woven together through eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. I close my eyes, the temple disappears. Open my eyes, the temple reappears. Switch off eye consciousness, then there's no thing to be seen. Open the eyes, eye consciousness comes back, the temple is back in consciousness, is apparent visually once again. So to see things with wisdom is to recognize that what our experience of the present is constructed from is patterns of sense consciousness arising, passing away. And all these patterns are anicca, dukkha, anatta. They are transient, they are uncertain, they are unsatisfactory. They can't be permanently pleasing and gratifying, satisfying. And they can't be who and what we are. They have no owner. They're not intrinsically a person or belonging to a person. They're not a self or anything belonging to a self. So when we see with wisdom, then we're looking really at the sort of deep tissue fabric of experience itself, the structure of experience. And that's in a sense more demanding, but also it's that much more liberating when we truly see that this is everything that we call our experience, moving about in the world, doing our thing, relating to other people. This is all just form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness arising and passing away. That's all. When the heart that truly sees that truly knows that, in that moment there's a profound quality of liberation. And that in that true seeing with wisdom, when there's real satipanya, there is a profound sense of unity. It's like that everything, all the separate things, are part of a single continuum. They're part of a single pattern known here in the present moment. And that quality of vision unifies them. It's not like saying that that they are connected on some sort of etheric level, but far more that just that simple recognition that it all happens here. Everything is known here. It all occurs within the space of this awareness, and it has these intrinsic qualities of anicca, dukkha, anatta. These patterns, these fundamental qualities of all experience, of all things. They're here. That's the nature of all of them. So that quality of unity, that unifying vision, and what helps us to unify with other people is to recognize, oh yeah, the perceptions of self, the perceptions of other, they all happen here. The part of the universe that's called me, the part of the universe that's called you, it all happens in the same place. It's all known in the same place. And when that's actualized, and I can say the words and we can hear that and think, oh yeah, that's right, that makes sense. Or you might think, oh, that doesn't make sense. I've seen things like that. But in that moment, when there's a genuine awakening to that, when there's a recognition that, oh yeah, the world happens in this mind. The world is known through this mind. It all happens here. It's known here, in this moment. In that there's a letting go of the habitual perceptions, the habitual ways of seeing. And in that moment, there's seeing with the eye of Dhamma. There's seeing that, yeah, this is, of course, how could it be otherwise? There's a recognition that experience and the way things are is apparent here and now. It's timeless. It's seen by this mind. Right? It's known in this awareness here. And when there's a genuine change of vision, when the heart actually knows that directly, then there's the quality of the Dhamma is recognized. There's a quality of wholeness, a quality of completeness, of simplicity. Nothing is missing. Even though what we might know in that moment is a painful feeling, or it might even be a feeling of sadness or grief, the very fact that it's known, this is a perception of sadness, this is a cold sensation, this is a bitter taste, that the quality of that as part of the natural order, part of the patterns of consciousness that weave together to be formed into this experience of the present, that the degree to which that is simply known, is recognized. This is just patterns of nature coming and going, changing. The degree to which that's truly known through the heart is the degree to which the heart is liberated. It's a very, very simple relationship. That the greater the degree of non-identification and letting go, the greater the degree of wholeness, the quality of completeness and unity. That integrated quality of Dhamma is recognized. The degree to which there is attachment or buying into habits of self-view, then the more solid, there's me here and the world out there, and this is good and that's bad, and I like this and I don't like that. And the divisive, discriminative quality of consciousness is being bought into. That's being the degree to which that's attached to and invested with a false solidity is the degree to which we'll experience alienation and division and a sense of separateness or alienation. So in this, I find this such a helpful set of principles to use in terms of how to cultivate the quality of a community consciousness, a quality of samagi, of a genuine harmony between ourselves and others, is just to notice every time the mind starts talking about them or us, just to flag that, to say, wait a minute. Where are they? Where am I? Where is the us that's here? Where is that? Who is that? Who says that's the whole story? When the mind says, well, he's like this, or she's like that, or I really miss him, or I want to be with her, or I don't like the way he does this, or I'm really excited about the way she does that. Just to notice every time the mind tries to create a person or a group of people, to create this place or that place, this monastery or that monastery, this this political party or that political party or this family member or that one. Just to simply flag that, to say, look at that. The mind is creating self and other. This is the habit of buying into self-view. Look at that. And the mind that notices it and looks at that, can see that is not entangled. That which is aware of it is not entangled in it. So to just simply notice that, to bring mindfulness to that habit. And you can't just will the habit away by snapping the fingers and deciding not to be that way, but just to notice the habit. Oh, look at that, I'm creating this person, I'm creating that person, I'm creating myself, I'm creating this friendship between us or this conflict between us. Look at that. Just developing that quality of looking, of feeling it out and seeing that's not the whole story. Look at that, how strong that habit is. And then in seeing that, looking at the strength of the habit and letting yourself feel and know the burdensome nature of that. And then just relaxing the heart, relaxing the attitude towards it. Just remember, this is just a story. This is just a habit of perception. It's not the whole thing. Letting the heart relax in relationship to that. And then just seeing how much the world changes. How different it is when we drop the habits of self-view, of me in here and you out there, this us here and them there, to just loosen that, relax that. And then mysteriously enough, when you let go of each other, when you stop creating the other, you find yourselves much more able to get along easily and harmoniously. When you meet, when the less that I create you in my thoughts or my expectations, when we meet, we actually meet. I'm not just talking to my projection or my expectations. I'm not just trying to present a particular image, but I can really meet you the way you are, and can be open to others. We can be open to each other in a whole different way, and through a much more peaceful and relaxed and easeful and genuine way, where we're relating through metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. We're relating through seeing with the eye of Dhamma, rather than relating through habits of self-view and seeing through the eyes of me and mine, self and other. And when we do that, then it's a blessing for ourselves. It's a kindness to ourselves. It's also a great kindness to others. That's why when Luang Por said the kindest thing you can do for your parents is not to create them. It's a great kindness to not be plastering our opinions and projections on each other. And when we do that, we are unburdened in ourselves, and also we find that people are much happier to be around us. We're much easier to be with, much more delightful to be in others' company. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening. Please take whatever is useful.